I need I need one more minute to get my video out.
Me
Finish
too.
my presentable makeup.
Okay, all right. Well, we got to get you all comfortable, but I really like to see you. I think that makes a difference. It's about building relationships today. It's probably the one that is the most important, that we're all face to face on this if we can be. We'll give another minute, and I want to go ahead and thank Vicki for being here with us. It's wonderful to have one of our senior sponsors to give some additional experiences, sharing, and some of her thoughts around this topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is building trusted relationships individually and then also from a network standpoint. And you all had some pre-work to do, so I hope that you brought that with you, because we are going to delve into those 5 relationships that matter. So that will be important. Polly, nice to see you. Thank you. How are you today? She's good. She's good. All right. That works. All right. I think Aditi and Susie, please join us via video here as soon as you're able to, please. And I'm going to have everybody do a quick hello. And for that, I'll have you on your video. As I mentioned, we're going to delve into relationships, building a network. And I want to relate it to really where you are in your career journey right now. And I'm going to say this at the beginning, but I'm going to reinforce it throughout. At this point in your career, leaders, your ability to build, expand relationships more deeply with individuals and more broadly inside your company are going to be the make or break difference for you in moving to those next roles. Would you agree with that, Vicki?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's no longer about what you do. It's about what you know and who you know. Mm-hmm. And who knows what you do. So those are the critical points. I'll also start out with the story, because we often think of relationships and our ability to lead as our team. Like that's our first thing. But likely all of you have gotten to a point now in your career where you're probably pretty good at leading your team. And yes, during our program, you're going to pick up some additional tools and ways to think about your team. But likely you all have built pretty good relationships with the people that are on your team. And of course, varying degrees, right? Typically we all have sort of those problem children along the way that are always a challenge to us as leaders and managers. And we've probably gotten fairly good at managing up with the person that we report to. But what I really want to focus on is being able to build those relationships with your managers' peers, with the Vickies of the world, one thing. And another critical one that you don't typically think about or be very intentional about, and that is with your very own colleagues, your very own peers in different parts of the business, in your business, but performing different functions or leading different areas. This is the time when you really need to be building those relationships, because as you move up in Otis, some of those people will move too, and they will be critical stakeholders for you in getting some of your initiatives approved, supported, sponsored, advocated for around the table. So I'll give you a story starting out with that, just so you know what I'm trying to set the context for. There is a woman who became president of Domino's Pizza. All right, Domino's Pizza is owned by Pepsi-Cola. Cheryl Batchelder is her name. When she became president of Domino's Pizza, she was super excited to put Domino's Pizza even bigger on the map. And they had tested those delivery bags, sacks, that a pizza could go into and stay warm all the way until the time it was delivered. But they hadn't perfected it. They had been testing it, it hadn't gotten work. She was determined to launch that. So she went down the path with R&D, getting that all done, and launched it into the marketplace. And it was a significant failure. In fact, it was such a failure that she was fired. And good news for Cheryl, after she took actually more than a year to recover from that colossal mistake, she went on and worked in another organization, eventually became CEO of Popeyes, became a super well-recognized CEO, talks about that story, has written a book about service. And so she is a very prolific, successful CEO, and now board member today on Chick-fil-A and so forth. But at that point, she talks about that story as being pivotal in her career. Being fired at that level is obviously significant and soul-searching. But here was the lesson that she shared at one of my signature things. She said, my colleagues around the table knew that the technology had major issues. I did not tap in to my peers on the history, on what they knew, and their expertise on how inside the Pepsi culture we could have accelerated that development. So I lost out on 3 significant knowledge opportunities. And because I had wanted so badly to prove myself as the new president of Domino's Pizza, I failed miserably. And so my lesson here to you, as we talk about building relationships today, I want you to have in your head peers, because they will and could be instrumental to you in your success at Otis or any other company that you might be in your future. All right. So I always love to put failures in front of us because it's a lot easier to learn from someone else's mistakes than make the same ones on our own. So that one is a colossal one. And so, Vicki, I'll just ask, have you any insight building relationships plus or minus from a peer level for you personally?
You know, I do. I actually have a story, which is earlier in my career, I had at my previous company, I had just become vice president of continuous improvement and was running problem solving in Six Sigma. And I reported to our European executive director. And it was very, very interesting because, you know, I was doing a worldwide tour, going to different sites, auditing the process, you know, meeting with teams. And then we had a European group meeting where we brought all the senior leadership together to talk about what we were doing and how we were going to change the company. And I'll never forget, after the review, my boss took me aside and said, "Hey, what are you going to do right now?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go get ready for tomorrow." And he said, "No, what you're going to do is you're going to go in there and you're going to invite key members of your team out to dinner. And then you're going to take them out to dinner and you're going to talk about everything that you can think about except continuous improvement." And I just looked at him and I thought, what's going on here? And he said, "You know, Vicki, in order to be a success, it's great to let people trust you and know that you're smart, but you don't always have to demonstrate that you're the smartest person in the room. And as much as you believe by doing that you're creating confidence from the team and your leadership skill, you have to remember that not only do people need to work with you, they have to want to work with you, which means, you know, when you don't create that environment, when you don't personalize, when you're not engaging your team, learning about them personally, letting them learn about you, and creating a relationship versus a leadership role with them, then you will lose. You will lose over time. And it was something that was really big for me because I thought I was rocking on all cylinders. You know, I knew everything. I was just really, really smart and just knew I was impressing these people. But what I didn't realize, I may have been impressing them with my skill. What I wasn't impressing them with was me as a leader of them. They didn't trust me, and they didn't trust me because they didn't know me. And I never gave them a chance to do that. And you know, I really learned from that event. I realized that I'm not uncomfortable. At that time, I wasn't comfortable socially. I was very comfortable speaking, very comfortable with work, but not especially comfortable socially. And, you know, when I got to know that team, took them out to dinner, and I admitted that about myself, it was just like, oh, we can help you with this, you know, and suddenly, you know, I'm having conversations with people where I only talked about work, and things sort of changed, and they realized, okay, she's demonstrated that, okay, she's not perfect, and she knows she's not perfect, and it's not that she didn't want to be with us, she was afraid to be with us. So let us help make her comfortable. And with that, I saw a will to want to be led by me change with the team. And they started to see that I did have their best interest, and I wasn't not being personable with them because I didn't personally like them. It was my own shortcomings, and they helped me get over that. But I really thank my leadership, and he was a great leader for that reason. And that is because one of the greatest things that he ever did with me and for me is that he helped me on the social aspect. And he explained to me, I don't have to be perfect. And it's okay to let people see your flaws. But people have to have a will to want to work for you and with you. And if you don't engage that, what they won't do is help you. They will. If you go down a bad path, if you're leading incorrectly, they won't step in and tell you, they just let you go. And you do need a village to create, let's say, your leadership style, to understand what your strengths are and your weaknesses are. If you're only giving one-way conversations, you are failing. You have a problem. You need two-way conversations to grow.
I love it. Vicki, I love it. And I don't know if you all notice, I take notes too. I learn something every single time. So thank you, Vicki. Let me finish my last little note on that. That was great. And that's a perfect setup. Vicki doesn't know what I'm doing here yet, but that's a perfect setup for where we're going to go on this. So let me go ahead and share a screen here. And I know Kate and Anna have actually done this little activity, but sorry, let me. Come on. There we go. All right, apology for that. Now, let me ask you all, do you see one slide?
Mhm.
All right, great. Oh, it takes a little maneuvering on this. All right, so we're going to talk, Vicki, thank you. That was a perfect explanation. And I hope that it sets up for all of you. Look, no matter how senior you are, you have to show this vulnerable, personable side for the very reason that Vicki points out. People won't want to help you if they don't trust you. And so building trusted relationships takes time. It takes intentionality. You don't just get it. And it is a two-way street, as Vicki said. So as we've continued on our Spark journey, we always anchor into this framework, right? We started out with who you are, how you show up, and then how you relate to others. And this relatable piece is actually one of the most compelling leadership attributes that you really have to have. So with that, let me start with a question. And I want you to think of a leader you admire. All right. It doesn't have to be someone in your business world. It could be, and I want you to jot the name of this person down in front of you. It can be someone that you work with now, someone you used to work with, someone you want to work with. It doesn't even have to be in Otis or in the business world. Maybe it's someone in the political arena, entertainment, sports, whatever. All right, jot down the name of someone that when you look at them as a leader, you admire them. You admire them. And then as you're thinking about them, I want you to think about 5 adjectives that you would use to describe this person whom you admire. Why? Why do you admire them? What are 5 words that you would apply to this person? Let me give you a minute to jot those down. All right, you got them? All right, what I'd like to know is not the name of the person. I want to know one adjective. We'll go around, we'll get different adjectives. I am quite certain about this. To give me one of your adjectives. So I'm going to follow on the Zoom thing and hopefully I won't miss anybody. Kate, let me start with you. Give me one of your adjectives.
Empathetic.
Empathetic, great. Sonia. All right, I didn't hear that. Are you muted on your phone?
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry. Friendly.
Friendly. Anna.
Resilient.
Resilient. Sarah.
Down to earth.
Down to earth. Snig.
Inspirational.
Inspirational. All different. Christine.
Charismatic.
Okay. Polly.
Vulnerable.
Okay. Vulnerable. Susie.
Available.
Right. Ooh, that's present. Yeah. Aditi.
Authentic.
Okay. And Vicky.
Approachable.
Approachable. All right. Did I miss anybody? Okay. All right. Those are great words. And you all have 4 more around there. So here's what I want you to think about. When you think about adjectives and capabilities and traits and so forth, oftentimes we kind of put them into 2 different buckets. We put them as into competencies or what I would call connectors. And what do we mean by that? Competencies often are really what I would call the more hard skills, if you want to look at it that way. Your intellect, your expertise, your knowledge, your wisdom, all of those things that you spend a lot of time developing and building in your career. And then you have these skills that are called the connector skills. And oftentimes they're called the softer skills. So, you know, the shared values, the empathy, the trust, the vulnerability, those things that make that person sort of the person. All right. And so you had 5 different adjectives and you likely have some in each of these areas, but I want you to look at your 5 adjectives and I want you to circle the ones that are competencies and underline those that are connector skills. So again, competencies are the more hard skills. You're going to circle those. And then you're going to underline the connector skills. So out of those 5, all right, now what I want you to do is raise your hand if you have more in one area or the other. So if you have more adjectives in competencies, raise your hand. If you have more adjectives in connectors, raise your hand. Okay. Now, that's probably no surprise as we went through this exercise, but why? Why is that the case? Why is that person in front of you that you admire have more descriptors on the connector side? Who wants to share what they think?
I'll start. I think those are traits that just resonate more. And I think at least for me, draw me to other people. Those are traits that I would to emulate, and I would hope that someone would say about me as well.
Great.
I think competencies are assumed in leadership, and I would also say a lot of people are competent, whether they're leaders or not. I think it's the differentiator of true leadership is in that connector space.
Yeah. Great with that as well, Susie. Wonderful comments. Who else has a thought on that?
I was thinking this actually resonates with what Vicky just said earlier as well. I noted down is you don't impress people with, as a leader, you not only impress people with your skill. Skill is a competency, right? More is how do you win? You need a village. You impress people with your leadership. And then this is about how do we connect and embrace and then bring a team together with us to win together. That's what I think of why connector matters.
Yeah. And Snig, I think you were getting ready to say something as well.
Yeah, so I was going to say, well, competencies are really foundational for a leader. To be a leader, you need to be competent. I think that's just the basic skill that any leader needs to have. But the reason that we have been able to think of a person who we admire is also because of those connector traits. Because we worked with so many different leaders, but the one that we could think of was because they displayed all of these traits that relate to connectors.
Yeah. And I want you all to look, you had 5 adjectives and I only had you share one. So you put down, I admire this person, and then you described them, right? And now that you're thinking about it, you probably could put down 5 more adjectives, right? But think about this, you admire that person for a reason. And so as you look at those adjectives, you probably, I know I often do this, to go, oh, I want to be like that. I want to do more of that, right? Oh man, I admire them. I wish I could, right? And I would say to you, that's wonderful. But I'm also going to say to all of you in a very loving, but maybe harsh way, you can never be that person that's on the paper in front of you. And you're probably sitting there going, that's kind of harsh, Carol. Why would I say that?
Well, each person is distinct and it's our signature. That's their signature. And just going back to the fundamental of this program, we all have our own individual unique traits that make us what we are.
Yes, thank you, Snig. Yes, exactly right, right? You can admire, you can emulate, try to say, well, I'd like to be more like that. And that's great. You should bring those on and you should look at leaders and you should try to do things that you know if they inspire you will likely inspire others. So that is definitely a way to look at it. And I know I've had many of those role models in front of me going, oh my God, they're just so amazing. I can never be like that. And it's so nice to know that I could never be like that for the very reason that I have my own thing, right? And so even getting comfortable in our own skin feels so good. So thanks, Snig, for doing that. All right, so let's move along here because now I want to talk about building that trusted relationship. All right, there are 2 kinds of relationship capital. One is called bonding capital. And bonding capital happens as a result of spending significant time with people who are, I'm going to say like you, meaning common things, meaning they're on your work team, meaning they're in your community, they're on the cul-de-sac of your neighborhood, they're in your church together, they're the parents of kids that hang out together, right? You have bonding capital with certain groups because there's some affinity related with that group. I'm showing you a picture here, which obviously we're in the same situation where over time you can build really great relationship capital in this virtual environment. And we know it happened during the pandemic. And we know that you can measure relationship equity through an AI capability, and companies have increased bonding capital inside their enterprises through the pandemic, measured so, because you're spending more time in this environment, you're getting to see someone's personality with what's behind them, right? So this is no surprise. What I want you to think about, though, is on an individual basis, how do you build that relationship? So when I decided to spend this much time in Signature around relationships, because I know the impact of it, I was telling my daughter at the time, who was in Nicaragua, and she says, she was on mission. She says, Mom, I love that. She says, no interaction is net neutral. Sorry, that's bonding capital. No interaction is net neutral. And I went, what do you mean by that? And she says, think about it. Every time you engage with someone, whether it's just a minute conversation or a 30-minute conversation, there's an outcome. That outcome is either going to be a stronger relationship, or maybe it's eroded in some way, but it's never going to stay exactly the same. So as long as you're going to move the needle, even if it's a little bit, move the needle in a very positive way. And I started to think about how much you could do in a 2-minute conversation. And so as I go through, I used to be very purposeful when I went to the grocery store, like get in and out as fast as I could with my list. Don't talk to anybody, bag my own groceries. I didn't have time for the chit chat. And I started to test that. And then I started to talk with people as they're filling my deli order. I went through the checkout line with people in it, and talked to people as they were helping me, right? And there is such a wonderful thing when you think about the opportunity to get to know someone and just asking a question. And now in my little mountain town in North Carolina, I've done that so much in my grocery store that I now know those people. I know their kids. I know when their son in the military is coming home. And it just makes for a much more relatable experience. And yet it only takes a minute. And oftentimes we think of building relationships as, oh, I don't have time to sit and get to know that person. But a minute at a time, you got that time. So think about that. And the other thing, as a leader, when you have people on your team, we often spend time in the current conversation, meaning, hey, Christine, you're doing a great job. And as managers of people, that's common. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it isn't. But I want you to think about, how do you give someone future potential? How do you say, wow, Christine, I see you could be an SVP at Otis, right? And so if you see something, this is your time as a leader to say it, call it out, even to your colleagues, even to your colleagues. There's a research that says 81% of managers feel their supervisor does not give them enough recognition. 81%. 89% say their colleagues don't. So colleagues aren't talking to each other, and they're not thinking about giving feedback and recognition to each other. This is your future. So I want you to think about that. You see, you're no longer being paid to do. You're being paid to think, and you're being paid for building relationships. So with that, let's talk about the pre-work that you had. Let me tell you why I asked you to do this. This is called 5 Relationships That Matter. If Cheryl Batchelder, as she became president of Domino's, had thought about her 5 critical stakeholder relationships, she might not have had that big failure and been fired. So as you pull out your worksheet, the most important thing is to think about, How are you, Polly? How are you, Snig? How are you, Susie, going to stand out at Otis? How are you going to drive impact? What is it about you, Susie, in the role that you're playing that sets you apart from the person who had it before you? What is it about you, Anna, that when, and I'm not going to say when, if Otis all of a sudden had to right size the organization and 1,000 people were asked to leave at your level, what is it about you that keeps you there? Right? I've been right-sized twice. And I will tell you that when I was right-sized, the rationale, I'll tell you, is maybe some of you have had this. My whole team gets restructured. They don't need me leading that. My team gets put into other areas of the organization. I've been sort of, considered non-essential in that role because I don't have a team. Makes sense, right? No. Had I shown how much value that I drive in that organization, if I had had relationships outside of my immediate area where people not only knew my title and what I did, they knew me as a person, that company would have said to me, this is happening, Carol, but you are so invaluable. We want you to move over here and we want you to do this in our organization. So you need to think about what it is about you that's driving value for Otis. So those top 3 things, those 3 big things, where are you going to make impact? And then who do you need to help you make that impact? Who are those 5 critical relationships? That was the next part. And then after that, I said, all right, give yourself a grade. Is it so strong that you gave it a top grade? Or is it a new relationship or a weak relationship that it got a bottom 1? Now, before I ask you to give me a poll on your numbers, I'm going to tell you that I did this with 35 CEOs, this exact activity. So they put up their big 3, they put their stakeholder relationships. Almost all of them had the chairman of the board as one of their 5, right? Who are the big stakeholders? And then I asked them to grade them. And when I asked them out of 5 relationships, how many of them had a 4 and a 5, the best relationships? Was there 1? Was there 2? Was there 3? Was there 4? Or were all 5 at that strength of a level? Do you know that out of those 35 CEOs, all of them had less than, or excuse me, 2 relationships at the most that they quantified at that top level? Being in proximity doesn't make it a relationship. So now let's ask you, as you look at your 5, this is a critical look. You can't fix it. You can't make it better if you don't know where it is today. So there's no indictment here. If it's a low relationship, it may be one you don't know very well. So you have 5 relationships. Samantha, I think we have a poll here. All right. So let's see, of your 5 relationships, all 5 were at a 4 or 5. 4 of the 5 had it. 3 of them had the highest level. Less than 3, my CEOs, less than 3 had a top score of 4 or 5. All right, so we all have opportunity, right? We all have at least 1 or more relationship that we can begin to think about. If you can see that. Did you all see the poll? Okay, stop sharing that. It won't let me. Samantha, can you take that down?
You want me to stop sharing the results?
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, so let's look at opportunity. You have someone you can begin to close the gap on. You have a relationship that you can expand on. So that's what we're going to do together. Okay, so you got them. Well, we're going to do a breakout here in a little bit. I want you to think about this. It takes 2 people to make a relationship, but it only takes 1 to change it. Oftentimes, the relationship just moves along, and we don't think about, ooh, that could be better. And that might cause you to have to do something very intentional to make it better. Very intentionally to make it better. And that's where this power comes in. That's what Vicky was talking about in her story about really figuring out where to build those relationships. All right. So I want you to think about this, what we call the trust equation. And I'm going to share this with you. And this is called from the Trusted Advisor. You need to build trust with people. And it involves a mathematical equation, as this book author, David Meister, put in his book, The Trusted Advisor. So I want you to think about it like this. It's not just soft skills. Trust has components of this. You have to show up and be credible. You have to be reliable. People have to be able to depend on you. They have to believe that what you say is what you do. You can't say I am dependable and then be late, right? What you say has to be backed by your actions. So you have to be credible. Those were the table stakes. Those were building your expertise, your knowledge. People have to see you as credible. Then they have to see you showing up, doing what you say you're going to do. And then the intimacy comes in. And this is where Vicky brought this home. I got to show up as a person. I got to show up as having, human failings. I've got to show up with vulnerabilities, right? When I do that, I create intimacy with someone. All three of those things help you build trust. They are all needed with that. So think about all three of those things. The denominator is self-orientation. Now, when I say self-orientation, what comes to mind? Snig is smiling there. Snig, what comes to mind when I say self-orientation?
Focus on myself, on my own needs. And I was smiling because I kind of did the math of assigning a 1 to 5 score to each. And then I changed the self-orientation score from 1 to 5 in my head. And that just shows the level of trust.
All right, great. Aditi, what do you think? What does self-orientation mean for you?
I mean, being authentic and true to your values and what you're trying to accomplish, if you will, instead of, running behind what everybody else has in plan for you.
Love it. Those are great. Vicky, how about you? What do you think self-orientation means? And when you're looking at it at this more senior level, when self-orientation shows up, what does it look like?
When I think of it, it's how am I leading myself? How am I making my own prioritizations? What is my authentic self that I'm bringing to the relationship? And I think it's really important because many times when we look at how people review us, it's also how we present ourselves to them. What are we giving them? And we have to really think about that. Am I giving them my true self? Or am I giving them very small pieces? And by the way, when you give pieces, people recognize it very quickly. And they question it and they wonder why. So what am I bringing to the party?
Yes, that is so perfect. People wonder why. I love that, Vicky. That was priceless. All right, we all know self-orientation when it's coming down the hallway. Someone's coming into our office, calling us, and they give that inauthentic, oh, Kate, did you have a nice vacation? And you can tell they're getting ready to ask you something that they need, they want, that's important to them, right? You can see it in someone's face. We understand that, but I want you to also think about self-orientation in a different way. I'm going to give you the definitions of each one of these. I went through the top 3. Credibility, we know what that is. Content expertise, reliability, do what we say we're doing, right? Intimacy, candor, disclosure, opening up. Self-orientation, the first one we kind of covered, overly fixated on ourselves. But the second one shows up as self-orientation, and we don't normally think about it this way. It means that we're self-protecting. Now, Vicki kind of talked about that. I'm only giving you a little bit. And therefore, if I'm not giving you very much, people start to wonder, what's she hiding? But self-protection shows up one other way. And I'm going to give it to you all, ladies, because I think this does show up a little bit more in our gender. And that is when we're getting ready to go to someone who's more senior that we feel maybe intimidated by, or maybe even in awe of because they're more senior, or we don't find them approachable, and it makes us have a little angst inside of our gut. We enter that discussion with a little bit of anxiety, like, I'm not sure how to have the conversation with this person. What do I say? Will that person even want to spend time with me? And we put this stuff in our head that we don't need to put in our head. And then it shows up in our body language. And that comes across as self-protection. And I don't think we realize that we do that. So if you enter into a conversation with someone, if you can enter into it with, I'm just curious, I want to learn. I want to learn what you know. I want to learn your perspective. I just want to learn from you. I don't have to show up and show you anything about what I know. I just want to learn from you. And I think if you can have that kind of orientation in building a relationship, it's not what you know, it's what you want to listen to and learn, that self-protection won't show up. What do you all think of that? What do you think of that new maybe perspective?
I mean, it resonates, Carol. I mean, I definitely have felt that before. And in the moment, you know, you start having this conversation, and I always feel it, like my anxiety, I feel it in my stomach, like right in the pit. And like in the moment, I go, gosh, I don't want to feel this way, right? Like I'm just talking to another human being who puts their pants on the same way I do, right? So you want to get yourself out of it, because it prevents you from being all of the things that Aditi just said. It prevents you from being your authentic self. And, you know, when I've had moments that I'm not feeling that way, I feel so much more confident. And I think my delivery and whatever I'm trying to learn or share comes across so much more impactful. And I get more out of the conversation versus when I come into it in this highly anxious state. So it resonates a lot.
I used to, and I've had to really learn this, but I used to get, when I got nervous, I would get real red. So it was very obvious to someone else that I'm not my, you know, that I'm a little bit nervous. So really had to work through how to keep that from happening. So yeah, I just might have just label it. I'm so nervous talking to you that I can't even say anything, right? Anybody else this resonates with?
Yeah, it resonates with me, and it, you know, I would say you kind of like spiral then too, right? You're anxious, you don't want to feel that way, and then like I hear myself, you know, saying or acting or, you know, being that way, and then it's like, oh my God, I'm, you know, making this worse, right?
So you guys have these relationships now. And I would encourage you, when you leave here, you want to look at all of them and say, how do I just improve each one of them? Okay. What I want you to think about today is you just said these are 5 key stakeholders. These 5 key stakeholders are critical help to you achieving those 3 big things. And you want to be known and you want to have impact at Otis. So let's take the biggest gap relationship. I'm going to put you in a breakout. You're going to have 15 minutes. And you're going to be with 2 others. I don't know, Samantha, I was thinking groups of 3. Does that make sense? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
I
There will
had
be one.
groups of 2, but I can definitely change it up to
You
groups.
add, you mean groups of 3, and I guess that's 1, 4 then. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Oh, no, 3 groups of 3. All right, 3 groups of 3, 15 minutes. Now you may know each other's person. You don't have to say the name of the person whose gap that you're trying to close unless you think someone in your breakout could help you, but you don't have to say the name because I know it's inside your company. What I would like you to do is say, hey, this is a person I'm trying to close the gap on. Here's why I think it's a challenge to close the gap. And so what I want you all to do is to brainstorm with each other of how might I close that gap? What's the first step that I should take in being intentional about making that relationship a little bit better? All right, so help each other. We'll come out, we'll debrief a little bit, and then we'll kind of close up with the network piece. So 15 minutes. Vicki, that gives you till 5 after to get up and have a cup of coffee. And I'll see you all back here at 5 minutes past the hour. Well, hello, welcome back. Okay, this is super, super important, a focus on this. And no matter what initiative you're working on or what your next role is, I would always encourage you to do this exercise. What are my biggest priorities? Where do I need stakeholders? Who are those important ones? And how do I build those relationships? Now, I'll tell you this story because this is I mentioned I did this with CEOs. I ran a CEO group. One of the new CEOs got fired and he wanted to come back and share with the group why he got fired. It's like, whoa. So there are 35 CEOs, they happen to all be males. And he sat in front of them and described the day that he got fired. And Brett was his name, and Brett had been there 18 months. And the chairman pulled him aside and he said, Brett, you are a fabulous leader. We brought you in to make significant changes in the company. You're super nice guy. He said, but you have tried to do so many things at once that you've had little impact on any. And so after 18 months, we can't afford to not drive faster. So we need to have someone else take the helm. That's often the case when we get a new role is two things. We think there are so many things we want to do that we start driving all of them because we're looking at this going, wow, I could change this. I could fix this. I could, right? And sometimes we just want to do it because we want to prove that they hired the right person. That might be another thing that goes through our head. But the idea here is to really focus on the biggest impact opportunities that you have. So now that we have that, we have our stakeholders. I hope that in your breakouts that you all were able to have some discussion on how do I start to close the gap. Let me just open it up for what was any ahas? What did you learn? What did you find helpful? Who would like to get us started about their group and what came out of that?
I can go first, Carol. In our group, I mean, 3 things for me personally that resonated. One, we all struggle with relationships, and there's, I don't know, some comfort in that knowledge of communal suffering. Which also means that I can reach out to my fellow people here in this program if and when I get stuck. So that was one. The second piece personally for my situation, and it very much relates to where we started, is talking to peers that may be in more influential positions to help with the particular stakeholder that you may be having difficulty with, instead of trying to solve it on your own or by yourself. And then the third thing was, it's as uncomfortable as it feels, it's helpful to take time to get to know people outside of work. It breaks things, and this is back to what Vicky was saying, and it came up in when all three of us were talking about it, is it doesn't come naturally, but if we force ourselves to become vulnerable and have that dialogue more often than not, you may not end up liking and be best buddies, but it softens, I think, your engagement and humanizes the whole thing.
That's great. Aditi, great insights. Thanks for sharing those. Who was on your team with you?
Sarah and Christine.
All right. Sarah and Christine, anything to add to Aditi's summary? Sarah?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think, you know, the leveraging peers to help with a sticky relationship was another like really key point, you know, for me. Aditi mentioned that, and, you know, it's not only, you know, by either utilizing them to kind of, you know, go around and help convince the person, but also gaining insight into, you know, how that person operates, how better to communicate and work with that person too.
Yeah, that's great. Christine, anything to add? You were in the group.
No, I think wonderfully said by both Sarah and Aditi. I had talked about, I was in public accounting at PwC for 10 years before this, where relationships didn't matter as much because you just shifted from client to client. So now I'm struggling a bit in this department now that we're working with longstanding employees here at Otis. So it's been an adjustment, and I appreciate all the feedback that was given by the team.
Is it tough for you, Christine, as a result of that, to when I think about Vicky's story about sharing some of yourself, is that sort of a new thing for you, or is that okay for you?
It's okay for me. I have no problem doing that. I just never did it previously, since the relationship was going to end right after the 3-month project ended. So how much do you invest? And now it's how do you invest with your colleagues that are going to be more longstanding? So it's been an adjustment and going well, but still navigating that.
All right, good. And I'm glad the lesson of reaching out for your colleagues, because an important part of the Spark component is getting to know each other as well, right? And being supportive of one another. So Kate, what you can maybe highlight for your group, and then we'll get your friends to also.
Yep. So I was with Snig and Anna, and the one example that I used, it wasn't a peer relationship. It was a more senior person in my reporting chain, who's new in the role, has a very big role. And so trying to think about how do I develop like a skip level relationship with this person, a touch point on a regular cadence, just so this person understands what I'm working on, what I'm contributing, getting some guidance on maybe you need to work with this person in this region or another person. And we talked a little bit about it. It's probably a lot on my confidence level of not thinking this person is too busy. How could he have time for me? But, you know, trying to leverage my manager to get that introduction and re-engagement with this person, so that I can have more visibility to him and he can have more visibility and guidance to me. We talked a little bit about confidence, and, maybe that's, I can't be pigeonholed into that to think that it's my confidence level. I should just reach out and go. And, they reminded me as being part of this program, it's a great opportunity. I'm probably on his radar. He doesn't know a lot about what I'm working on, and just to talk about the subject matter and get to know him a little bit better on a personal level.
Yeah, I think those are great. And one ad I would do is, and Vicki, you can maybe coach as well. That area that, remember we just started out with competencies and connectors. It's not necessary, Kate, for you to have to think about, let me ensure he or she knows what I'm working on. I would just adjust that a little bit and let he or she know what you're passionate about. As opposed to taking them information, letting them know what you're excited about, what you want to learn about, what you care about. That's going to be, that's going to advance that more quickly than the knowledge that you have.
No, that's
Vicki,
great.
you have any
I
thoughts
love
on that?
I love the equation, like credible and reliable. I think I probably need to just check those off, but I like that, what I'm passionate about. That's great.
Yeah.
You know, Kate, one of the things that I would coach you with, especially if it's skip level, one of the best ways to create a relationship like that is to allow them to invest in you. So it's one thing, you know, you talk about what you're passionate about, and then understand what they're passionate about, and how the two of you can communicate together. And one of the things that, you know, I won't call it a trick, but one of the things that you have to understand, when people put their IP in you, their time and their attention, and they give you something that allows you to elongate the relationship, when you consume their time, they're investing in you. And when you invest in something, you want to get something back from it. And that something back is to see the person grow, or see them have a great opportunity, because, you know, we all want to feel good about ourselves and our investments. You know, when you invest and it doesn't come out so well, you feel horrible. But when you invest and something great comes from it, you feel like, you know, I'm the smartest guy or the smartest woman in the world. So allowing them to invest in you. So this is kind of two-way, and walk away from that conversation within a next step. Not a beginning and an end. It's over, it's done. Don't do that. Lead it into something else, and allow it to be part of that two-way conversation. Because once you've done that and they agree to that, they're now investing in you. And
Yeah, I love that.
from that.
Yep. Great.
That's great, Vicki.
Thank you.
Susie, you were in the group with, I guess, Snig and Polly. Are you three the one? No, Sonia and Polly, the three. All right, why don't you give a little highlight out of your group?
So I think what we ended up talking a lot about was how powerful it can be when we had talked about some like higher level, like ELT members, right? For a couple of us. And it's not that we can't build that relationship. Their time is super valuable, right? And usually we're presenting to or building the business case for. We talked about the power of building the network of influencers of that executive, right? Who is really in their ear, and who can speak on your behalf, and who can sort of promote what it is you're trying to do in, you know, when you're not there, when you're not in front of that person. And, you know, for my example in particular, Polly gave me a lot of she's at I've got a DT project. She's in DT, gave me lots of really good advice, and Sonia also did too. So really valuable conversation.
And so going back to the very beginning, Aditi said, look, one of the outcomes of this exercise is the sharing of my thinking with someone else, being able to get what's in my head out of my lips into someone else's ears allows a different perspective. And so this goes back to the beginning in the way that we open this up. As you build these bonding relationships with other people, right? This is where you use them as sounding boards. In fact, I love this phrase a lot. I've used it a lot in my career. It resonates with people. I'll go to a colleague or even my manager, if I'm not asking specific advice, I'd say to them, hey, listen, can I just have a moment with you? I want you to be my thought partner. Here's what I'm thinking. Tell me what your thoughts would be around this, right? Could you just be my thought partner? And people, it's like an immediate engagement, like, oh yeah, that'd be fun. I just want to have some open thinking as well. And it doesn't feel like someone has to give you coaching. They don't have to give you advice. You're not trying to ask them, like, what should I do? You're just saying, I just need a thought partner, and let's bounce some ideas. And that phrase literally has made huge inroads for me in my career in using that phrase with people. So that's something that you might want to use. All right, so we're gonna move on and close out our session a little bit around the network, but the network happens as a result of building relationships one at a time over time. That's what a network is. First of all, it is not a verb. You are not networking. Building a network is a strategic asset. It's a noun. And it shouldn't be overwhelming. If you think about what we just went through, it's just a collection of relationships, but they're built one at a time over time. So you all are in a point in your career at your level where you got lots of forward motion and opportunity, years to build a network and build those relationships that support you in your ongoing endeavors. It's not too late. It's about where I started about this time in my career. I felt, confident enough in my own right that I could have those conversations. I figured out how to stop getting those red faces. I learned different ways to ask questions, and those have served me well. So the other kind of capital that I want you to think about is something called bridging capital. And bridging capital, as opposed to bonding capital, is building relationships with new people who aren't necessarily in your affinity area. This would be like you taking your function and going to another business area of Otis, to that person who also runs what you run in a different area. And you're saying, hey, Joe, you and I both run the same areas. Excuse me. I'm sure we've learned a lot through the pandemic and the transformation that Judy's putting us through. I'd love to just spend some time with you and hear what you've learned. Maybe we could compare notes. And so you think about building those relationships that are bridging other areas of the business. So bridging to a different function, a different geography. In fact, now that you're traveling again, if you're headed to Connecticut and you've got a meeting set up because you're going to be in Connecticut, I would strongly encourage you to have one meeting in that day that is not in your direct agenda requirement. Someone you don't know, someone that you just want to get to know, someone that you want to grab a coffee with. Be very intentional. In fact, if you did 3 of those a month, just people to connect with, get to know, think of the enterprise network that you're beginning to build over time. Okay. If you look at it by that way, just little steps, they tend to build on themselves. And so I call that really as, building equity before you make the withdrawal. All right. You all have savings accounts. Just because you have a checkbook doesn't mean you can just write a check. If you don't have deposits in there, there's nothing to withdraw. So that's the same way with relationships. You're putting deposits in the bank so that you can make a withdrawal someday. Okay. And I would encourage that the best advice you get is not what's given to you. It's what you ask for. There are going to be lots of people around you that have all kinds of advice that are very happy just to give it to you. So be specific and intentional about what it is that you actually would like to know. So with that, Vicki, any final words of wisdom for this group?
One thing I do want to make sure as we walk away today is we've talked a lot about, networking, leveraging up and what you can get, but I can't emphasize to the team how important collaboration with your peers are, because I promise you, when you make that transition to the next level, it's not a bunch of EOT guys that are trying to figure out who you are, what you're doing. It's the advocate that has said, hey, you know what? I've been working with Jill and she works with the engineering team. She's been doing this, and your name comes up in events. It comes up because you've been collaborating with different team members. And once that happens, you have a level of IP, you have a level of value that the company starts to say, let me learn some more about this value, because you now are an intrinsic leader, whether you work for them or not. And I can't tell you enough. I think some people miss that. They're very busy managing up, but they really do forget that, I'm in quality and I'm on a certain level, but if Julia Belinassi never says my name, if Chris Bailey never says my name, as Robin Fiala never mentions my name in any conversation over any project, I promise you I'm losing. I absolutely promise you I'm losing. If the executives in the region don't mention my name and report on what's critical they're working on, I'm losing. So I want to make sure that you really consider that and you think about that piece of it. Not just good things being said by your boss, but good things being said by those who are your peers within the organization, what you're doing, not just for yourself, but with them, collaborating with them. It's really critical. That there's a lot of positive energy that comes from that towards you.
That is so well said. It's sort of the echoes that come back. Yeah, you've got to be known by other people. Go back to that's not what you know, it's who knows what you know and what you're about. So you do have to have other voices in the room talking about you. It's not enough for your manager to be that one. And it's not enough to have the manager and your sponsor out of this program. 2 is still not enough. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, we missed Lindsay today. We always try to recognize the birthday people. So do send an email to Lindsay and wish her a happy birthday. It was just this past week. And then here's what we have ahead. So these are the next sessions. We're going to talk about creating capacity in August, and then cultivating a growth mindset, resiliency, and agility. And then we have the sponsor panel. So that kind of gives you a little look ahead. They should all be on your calendar. But I'm going to reemphasize something that Aditi said right at the beginning when we came out of the breakout. This is powerful. You get a sponsor. That's great. But you also get this cohort. Vicki and I can't tell you enough. Having peers talk about each other. Look what you got right here. If you all are speaking about each other, for each other, and helping each other in the Otis environment. Oh, I know Sonia, she and I run this cohort together. Man, she's got this amazing ability to do blah. You all need to do that for each other. This is probably one of the most powerful and important components of this whole Spark initiative. We put the emphasis on your senior sponsor, but I'm going to tell you, this is going to be important because guess what? Sarah's going to get this big promotion and then she's going to want to bring people on her team. Where's she going to look? Maybe some of you right here in this experience that she's had, Sarah's going to take you with her. So that's what I would be thinking about, is making sure that you all know each other and that you can talk to each other and you reach out to each other and you don't just wait till our August 8th creating capacity session, that you're doing that amongst the sessions that we have. Let's thank Vicki. Vicki, wow, great stories. Appreciate all that. Any final questions, comments before we send you off? Helpful? Good today?
Awesome.
A nugget or
Really
two?
insightful. Really
Great
insightful.
session.
Thanks, Vicki.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Everybody have a good day. Go work on that relationship equity. All right. Both bonding and the bridging, and we'll see you in August.
Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.